Good evening. You guys are all sitting in the back again where the TV cameras can't see you. Come on, huh? They think we're talking to the wall. You got to help us out with this. I'm going to pester you every meeting until you guys all sit in the front row, especially you, Chief, and you, Battalion Commander. Yeah, I see you guys hiding in the back. Okay. Clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Martner?
Present.
Councilmember Costa?
Present.
Councilmember Starbuck?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vice Chair Lingle?
Here.
Mayor Chair Lynn?
Here. And now, although it's not on the agenda, I'd like to personally thank Darren Hunt from the New Hope Christian Church, who agreed to come and fill in for our invocation. Pastor?
At the outset of this council meeting to ask you to grant wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to our mayor and council members today. Bless them beyond their natural and learned abilities to rightly govern this community you have placed them in. I thank you for their lives, their willingness to serve, and their aptitude for government. Please grant to them at this special time of year both your favor and your compassion. Regardless of anyone's opinion of why Christmas is celebrated this week, it is a time for giving. Thank you for your gifts to humanity, and may humanity, especially us in Lompoc, inspired by these leaders today, seek to give of ourselves for the betterment of this community. Oh God, bless this council, this meeting, and this community today and always. In my Lord's name, amen.
Amen. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to say two at the end. Thank you all for joining us this evening and taking part in your city government. We look forward to hearing from you about the things that are going on this evening. First, we have a special presentation from our police chief, Tim Dabney. Or is it captain? I don't know. Should we keep going with that?
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Before I begin, I was reminded to mention to the audience and to the viewers on television that although this is the holiday season and it's time for great mirth and joy for most of us, that there are some in our community that would prey upon the goodwill of others. So when you're shopping, make sure you lock your doors to your vehicle. If you're shopping, don't leave gifts in plain sight. Put them in the trunk. And just be wary out there and lock your doors and just don't present opportunities where they wouldn't normally arise. Now, what brings me here this evening is recognition and presentation for the Special Olympics. To start off with, I'd like to identify some of the partners that we have in our endeavor to raise funds as the Lompoc Police Department to support the Special Olympics as an official charity of law enforcement. First and foremost is the Lompoc Foursquare Church. Each year the Foursquare Church arrives at the park with a small army of volunteers, and they will be there until the last car leaves the park. So the Foursquare Church is a huge partner in terms of helping us with volunteer manpower and all of the concessions and all of the games for the children, etc. We'd also like to thank George and Cheryl Bedford of the Sunset Auto Center for their support. This year, 2010, marks the 9th year that they have donated a crate motor to our raffle. The retail value of 9 Chevy motors is about $15,000. Mike Perry of Perry's Auto Parts and Garage has supported the show from the very beginning. Mike and his group used to do the barbecue for us for the first 7 years and passed that on to the Lompoc Kiwanis Club in the last couple of years. But every year he's donated a huge tool chest for each year in the raffle. And as mentioned before, the Lompoc Kiwanis has picked up the barbecue, and they're serving up to 800 meals at the day of the event. There are many, many, many sponsors and people from our community that help with this event, and we couldn't put this on without their help, so thanks to them. In summary, we've just completed our 9th annual car show and cruise. Actually, it was a couple months ago, and we're happy to report that we're able to offer a check to Special Olympics of Northern Santa Barbara County. And if I could have Rita Gutierrez, the operations coordinator for Special Olympics, Kevin Kurz, one of our Special Olympic athletes, Barbara Kurz, a parent and certified volunteer, Larry Kurz, also a parent and certified volunteer, Diana Anderson, a coach and a parent, and Maya Anderson is an athlete. If you could all come up here, and anybody else that I missed. We are happy to provide Special Olympics of Northern Santa Barbara County a check again this year for $25,000. And to date, the Lompoc community has raised just over $207,000 just in the car show event for Special Olympics. So we'll give you the big check. And here's the real check. Who wants that? Would you like to say something?
Yeah. I'll make this get to the appropriate place. I just want to thank the Lompoc Police Department, the Lompoc City, for allowing the police department to put on this car show. It benefits the athletes as well as the volunteers and coaches who put in all the time and effort for Special Olympics here in Northern Santa Barbara County. It is one of our, well, I want to say the biggest fundraiser that Northern Santa Barbara County does here for Special Olympics, along with all the tip of cops and the other little fundraisers we do. So all this money stays in Lompoc to benefit the athletes, whether it's sports equipment, traveling, meals. There's a lot of different things that go into Special Olympics that kind of behind the scenes people don't really see. For instance, we just went to San Diego this weekend, and then the following weekend before that, we went to Fountain Valley for our fall games. So, again, just thank you very much to the City of Lompoc and the Police Department for putting on this great event, and we look forward to a partnership in the years to come. And thanks to Harry for all of his hard work and dedication. So.
One of the things I'd like to say from the athletes is that one of the things the officers do is when they have the car show and they have the cruising night, the officers and the chief take the athletes in their vehicles and drag up and down on Main. These guys just love it, and they talk about it for days and days, and we want to thank all the officers for doing that.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Thank you. Harry? We'd also like to recognize Ramona Guzman and her son Corey. They couldn't be with us this evening, but we'll be presenting them with plaques for all their support. Ramona is a city employee. She's a part-time employee with the Parks and Rec Department, a longtime volunteer with Special Olympics, and her son is a Special Olympian. I do want to turn the microphone over to Harry Height, but before I do, I'd like to read something to you really quickly. Over 9 years ago, Sergeant Harry Height embarked on a project to assist Special Olympians and Special Olympics as an official charity supported by law enforcement. He has rallied broad-based support for the Lompoc Police Department car show held every Labor Day weekend since 2002. Sergeant Height's pursuit to make the car show a top-rate event has driven him, no pun intended, to engage in more community volunteers and make the car show bigger and better each year. The addition of a cruise night and the adoption of the annual fundraising event as an official city function has made the Lompoc Police Department car show a signature event for the Lompoc community. The Lompoc Police Department car show and cruise night draws hundreds, if not thousands, of car enthusiasts to our city each year, as well as celebrity personalities like Andy Granatelli, Eric Estrada, and this last year, Ed Kooky Burns. And he is. I mean, Mr. Burns. In 2010, the Lompoc Police Department once again made a sizable contribution, as you just saw, to the Northern Santa Barbara County Special Olympics, bringing the gross contributions to over the past 9 years to well over $200,000, and I think the number is $207,000. Sergeant Height's dedication goes far beyond fundraising as he participates as a volunteer for Special Olympics competitions and events. Sergeant Height is an ambassador of goodwill as he demonstrates his love for his community and selflessly works to help those families who daily face the challenge of disability. The Lompoc Police Department car show and cruise night that benefits Special Olympics would not have been possible without the work of Sergeant Height. So thank you for your dedication to our community and to Special Olympics. And this is a special certificate of recognition for Sergeant Harry Height, retired.
Welcome our new members of the council, Mr. Mayor. Welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. It was great to have this in the holiday season, to be able to transfer these funds in the holiday season. Unfortunately, Ramona Guzman, who we were just talking about, has fallen ill and just had a major surgery. So we will be spending some time with her family and try to help them get through the season. But this is a big bright spot, and Merry Christmas to all of you. Thank you.
Harry, I'd like to personally thank you because I've seen how hard you've worked on this for years, and it's been an outstanding event, and you're the reason for it. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have staff announce, or the city administrator's report.
Mr. Bayer, City Council, audience and viewers, I have 3 brief announcements. First, City Hall will be closed this Thursday, Friday, the 23rd and 24th, to observe Christmas, and again on Friday next week, the 31st, for New Year's Eve. Second, the council agenda for the workshop next week on the 28th, Tuesday, will be posted on the city's website by close of business tomorrow. And the PowerPoint that includes all of council's submittals will be linked to the agenda for viewing. And lastly, our City PEG manager, Greg Ratcliffe, advised the following Wi-Fi webcast internet connection results of viewers that were watching the Lompoc High School Braves football CIF championship game. This was a couple of weeks ago when the Braves won the CIF championship title. Total Wi-Fi webcast connections were 4,968, originating from 107 different cities in 28 states and 4 countries. And that's not bad. So again, on behalf of the City of Lompoc, we congratulate the Lompoc High School Braves football team for winning this year's CIF football championship title. And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you very much. That's rather amazing coverage, and the folks at TAP TV were very proud of it. Staff requests and announcements?
Nothing tonight, Mr.
All right, and now we have Council Development Agency requests and announcements, and I will start with, I'm just going to go from the right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to report that last Thursday, on December 16th, myself, Councilmember Costa, Arlene Peltzer from the Community Development, and our City Administrator, Laura Barcelona, we attended a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce, and it had to do with a program called New Market Tax Credits. They had a gentleman from down south, Tim Sales, do a short presentation. And briefly, what new market tax credits are, it's a way of subsidizing investors. I'm specifically talking about possibly investors in our downtown area, the theater and some of the other buildings down there. The investors would invest in the downtown area. They immediately get 39% return through tax credits. It was an interesting presentation, and what I'd like to request the council that we direct Ms. Barcelona and staff to continue a conversation with Mr. Sales, and if appropriate, bring back to council a short presentation for possible follow-up on that. So with that, I'd like to ask council to help or support me when directing staff.
Councilmember Starbuck, is that good for you? He just wants your support, so you can say yes.
I support you.
Okay. Councilmember Costa?
If I may, sorry, Mr. Mayor, just so I'm sure that I understand, keep the record clear.
Yes.
Councilmember Lingle, are you asking for an item to be on the agenda that involves the entire downtown or things for the entire downtown?
It would be just a recap of a possible presentation from Mr. Sales as to what could possibly happen in the downtown area.
With the tax credits. It
With
could
the tax
actually
credits.
happen
It wouldn't
anywhere.
it doesn't have to be in the downtown area. This is just one possibility.
My suggestion would be, again, just to keep everything in order, that only you and Councilmember Costa and Councilmember Martiner vote on this.
Sure, okay. That's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I did attend the meeting and was also mesmerized by this wonderful outlook that he presented to us with these tax credits, I think that it's definitely worthwhile to get some more information, hear a presentation, and do some research on that. So if staff can do that, I would appreciate it.
Councilmember Martiner?
Do we need 3 votes for a presentation? This is not an agenda item. This is going to be a presentation, no discussion. No vote on it. Are you asking for a presentation, or are you asking for some level of decision making?
Well, it's going to be it's a presentation if appropriate. I'm asking that we direct staff to continue conversations with Mr. Sales, and if they feel appropriate, bring it back to staff for presentation.
Bring it back to the council.
Bring it back to the council, that's correct, yes.
Okay, so let's make it clear. You are requesting that the staff meets with Mr. Sales and determine whether it's appropriate that this is something that the council should look for potential downtown redevelopment?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yes, I guess.
Okay. Thank you very much.
One more.
Sorry, you got more?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
The other thing is, if there was an article or an editorial in the paper today, and it talked about Christmas parades, Christmas trees. This being the Christmas season, I thought it'd be appropriate that, as a council, we consider bringing it back for discussion about the possibility of renaming our Christmas parade and decorating our Christmas tree here in town. So bring it back for discussion. So I'm asking that we direct staff to bring it back to council, agendize it for a discussion.
Yesterday I have been a...
Finish again.
Oh. Yes.
Yes.
Do we need a unanimous vote on this, or?
You can put your 2 cents in.
I don't have 2 cents on this issue. I'll discuss it if it's brought before me. If not, that's okay as well.
Okay, yesterday I attended a Walmart public relations brief where I received an update on the urban decay study
And I would also like to request staff to replan a date for the Transit Center architectural presentation other than the 18th.
I guess I just have a question. You want it for the transit center other than the 18th because of the possibility of a long meeting with Walmart?
That would be one possibility, and the fact that we have to be in Sacramento at 9 o'clock the next morning. We're so trying to at least finish one item on the agenda of that meeting.
Welcome to the City Council. I'll support that.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't hear Dirk mention, I was at the meeting with him speaking to a Walmart executive and their public relations firm to receive more information. That's also available to the public online on our website regarding the urban decay study.
Okay. City Administrator, do you need a consensus from us to relocate that item, or can you just act accordingly?
That item will be moved to another agenda night.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Costa, you would be next. Do you have a report? No? Okay. Councilmember Martiner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing that I have to report is that I attended a air pollution control district meeting on December 16th in Santa Barbara, and I did not incur any city expenses.
Okay, I have a couple things. I attended the SB-CAG meeting in Santa Barbara on the same date. I did not incur any city expenses. There was one item on the agenda which was on the consent calendar that affected the city of Lompoc. It was a request by the city of Lompoc for a extension on the percent of fare box revenue for our bus service. As it was explained to me from our public works director, the method that was formerly used to calculate the percentage of fare box revenue that was required for the city of Lompoc, which had been used for a number of years and audited by SB-CAG's auditor, was found by their new auditor to be incorrect because somewhere down in the very bowels of the subtext there was one little sentence. And so our fare box percentage was not in compliance with whatever rule it was supposed to be in compliance with, and I'm sorry, I don't remember that. And the number that we were at was substantially below the target, and it would not have been practical to reach that target in a one-year period. So based on another rule, the SB-CAG voted unanimously on the consent calendar to give Lompoc 3 years at the 15% fare box revenue, and that means that for every dollar in cost in operating the bus, 15 cents must come from fares. The rest of it comes from federal and state funds. And then on the fourth year, we would have to reach the 20% range. And so that passed and that's solved, and I'm sure we'll be seeing more about that in the future to start working our way up to that number. On December 3rd, the city received a letter from the new county executive officer regarding the proposal to contract fire services to the county. After reading the letter, which all the council members received, I was not absolutely certain I understood the county's position on various financial questions. So on December 10th, I sent a letter asking very specific questions so there would be no misunderstanding on this critical issue. Council members also received a copy of that. We have received a copy from the county, and based on the response, the city administrator had the management services director prepare a year-by-year cost analysis chart for the first through, I think, 5th years of it, which has also been distributed to the council. Because this is such an important item, I would like council consensus to place this item first on our workshop for Tuesday, December 28th. And are there any comments on that, or would everybody be in favor of that?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question regarding what is it specifically that you would like to put on the workshop, that it becomes an agenda item and we consider or we ask the county to continue with this, or to just have a general discussion Is it going to be a decision-making type of, or is it going to be a presentation?
Good question. City Attorney, how would you characterize this?
Mr. Mayor, it depends on what you want to accomplish. I'm not sure I can respond. It's what's your intent.
Okay. Any thoughts, City Administrator? Do we want to, are we at a point where we could just make it a question of shall we or shall we not and have a presentation with that regard?
If you feel that that's going to provide you enough information in the letter, if there's further information that you'd like staff to present, then we would need to put together a presentation that would provide additional information.
So how about if we proceed this way? We would have a discussion and determine if we have adequate information to make a decision at a forthcoming meeting where it could be agendized. If we don't feel like we have adequate information, we could give instruction to staff so that we had information to agendize it for a decision at a forthcoming meeting. It would be on the same format as our other things, which would be, shall we do this?
Make a decision regarding what? We're soliciting a request for a proposal from the county, or a decision to accept it or deny it? I'm
No.
sorry, I need
What
some clarification of what is the decision that we're looking for.
I think the decision would be whether we feel we have adequate information to move forward and make a decision at an agendized meeting, or if we need additional information before that agendized meeting.
Make a decision whether we want to consolidate, or whether we
At the
want to...
agendized meeting, we would make that decision, yes.
But we don't have a proposal yet. Do we?
Yeah, we have a draft proposal and 2 letters that describe their position.
My understanding from the previous time in which we got an update from the staff was that the county was not going to proceed with a proposal until the city specifically asked and request to continue with that. So that's my understanding. I don't know if that has changed.
No, that remains the same. However, they have indicated that they really don't want to spend a lot more time on this. If we do not clearly understand what the costs are, and the letter I sent to them was to make it clear to us what the costs are. It may not be the absolute precision answer, but it's a very close answer, and based on that, we need to make a determination if what we want to do.
Okay, so the workshop would be to make that determination,
Yes.
given the information that we have today. Either determine that we need more information,
Yep.
or that we are going to say yay or nay.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I think to your point, we would have, perhaps the ultimate decision would need to be agendized. I don't, okay. Is everyone comfortable with that? Yes? Okay, so that'll be the first item. Number 2, the County Office of Emergency Services has been issuing rain advisories, which I think you all received by email. As you know, because of erosion by the Sandy Inez River, we've lost about 3 acres of land adjoining the bike trail. I visited the location yesterday and found that we only had minor erosion at this point because the river level wasn't too high. There is in the possession of city staff a draft report on the erosion, proposed repair alternatives that the Public Works Department has just received, and I read the draft today. Again, because this item is kind of urgent, we don't have the final answer, but I would like the council to receive a brief presentation regarding what we have and to discuss some alternative solutions to give staff direction for the future. And that would be at our workshop, and that would be the second item for the workshop ahead of those things that we had previously agreed to do. Is everyone comfortable with that? Sorry, guys. The rain got here. Okay, now I have good news. Several weeks ago, staff was contacted by Sean Brewer, the owner of Pacific Coast RV Sales, Parts and Service of Pismo Beach. He met with staff, and then he had a meeting with the city administrator and myself regarding opening an RV sales and service location at 901 East Ocean in Lompoc, the former Lompoc Honda Yamaha facility. And after our meetings, he called both the city administrator and myself back to thank us for the warm, helpful reception he had received from the staff and from Laurel and myself. And he went on to say he had decided to open a second location in Lompoc on or about February 15th. And we were all going, yeah, this is good. Then fate intervened in a strange way. Night before last, a retention basin near his Pismo Beach location began to fail, and he was forced to evacuate his entire inventory of trailers and RVs, which he successfully did. Ultimately, the lot and the buildings were filled to a depth of roughly 6 feet. This was kind of hard on the repair shop, and the shop equipment is still underwater, and so that may be difficult for him. But because the building can't be reoccupied for at least 6 months, it's currently condemned. He will be opening in Lompoc on January 15th, and if you drove by there today, trailers began arriving because he had them parked on the street in Pismo Beach. So we look forward to helping him with his sudden relocation, and I have told him that the entire community will be out there to greet him and help him, and it's all good news. And that is all I have. Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies, forgot to mention that Councilmember Starbuck, Mayor Lynn, and myself attended on December 15th the LAFCO information meeting at the Buellton City Hall, where we were introduced to individuals who worked for LAFCO and explain the process and trying to get more information as we go and just learning as much as we can. So that was good news for us to get involved with that, and I just want to let the public know.
We came up to speed very quickly. Okay, and now we have the consent calendar. Oops, I missed oral communications. Sorry, guys. Okay, this is your opportunity to speak to us on any subject that has to do with the city. Who would like to be first? Come on, you guys. People at home are going to think there's no one here. Okay, seeing no one rise, we'll close oral communication. City Clerk, do we have any written communications?
We received a letter from Mayor Lynn and Councilmember Starbuck indicating their interest in real properties here in the city limits of town. And everybody has received a copy of it.
Okay, and just for the audience out there, City Attorney, could you discuss what that's about, please?
This is a requirement of the California, or the Community Redevelopment Law, which California has passed to deal with the community redevelopment agencies, and it requires new council members, when they're elected, if they own property within a redevelopment project area, they have to note that in writing to the board, and then both the city council and the redevelopment agency board have to pass a motion accepting it so that it appears on the record of each in your minutes. And the letters were submitted a couple weeks ago.
What if we get 3 no votes?
It would still be on the record.
Do we need to take a formal action at this time, or is that in the future?
Yes, you should make a motion. Both bodies should make a motion to receive and file those 2 letters.
Would you be kind enough to make that motion for us, please, so we do it correctly? And someone else will be happy to make it.
You can make the motion, no?
That both the city council and the redevelopment agency board receive and file the letters that were submitted by Mayor Chair Lynn and council member, agency member Starbuck regarding the interest they have in property in the project area.
And who would like to have that as their motion?
I can make that my motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Martner. And who would like to have that for a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, but now I need to ask, do we vote on this motion? Yes, we do. Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to accept the letters, and now we should We don't have to take public comment, do we? Okay, I don't want to miss it twice. Could we go ahead and vote, please? And that passes 5-0. Are there any other written communications, City Clerk? Thank you. Okay, oral communications, the last chance for the 10 of you out there who have not said anything yet to come up and address the council. No, thank you. Seeing no one rise, we'll come back to Council Redevelopment Agency requests, comments, and meeting reports. Who would like the first bite of this apple, as it were? No one. I think we all got them at the beginning. Okay. And the last thing would be adjournment to the Council Redevelopment Agency workshop at 6 p.m. on December 28th. That is 6 p.m., not 7 p.m. here in the council chambers. Thank you for joining us. And now we'll go to the consent calendar. I have to announce that I will abstain on voucher 295426. And I want to point out that on vouchers 295334 and 5, we are paying $2,949.96 to the County of Santa Barbara for property taxes on River Park. And on vouchers 2953367 and 8, we are paying $6,908 in property tax for the property along the bike trail and Riverbend Park. We also have the approval of the minutes, the revision of the Human Service Commission mission statement, and memorandum of understanding regarding property at the southwest corner of Ocean Avenue and R Street. That would be a mutual maintenance agreement for the new community center, and final acceptance of the step and cap seal project, which was conducted all over town. There were 2 change orders on that project. The first change order involved the use, let me back up. The weight of the aggregate that was used by the contractor that was using it was slightly less than the bid rate, so we pay by the ton, so at the end of the day we had some tons coming, and we had some other projects that needed some work, and there was a little expansion of the project using the under tonnage from the project plus some money from the change order fee to do some other work because they were all here and it was very cost effective. And then there was also a change order to do some work at the airport around the fuel tanks that was billed to the airport. So those were the 2 change orders involved. Does anyone have a comment on any of the items on the consent calendar? Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be interested in pulling item 3 from the consent calendar, revision of the Human Services Commission mission statement, simply because this hasn't come to council previously, and I would like the public to have the chance to comment, know what the change is, and comment on that change if they feel necessary.
Okay, we'll remove that from the consent calendar. Does anyone else have a comment? Could we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item number 3 that Councilmember Costa has pulled.
Councilmember Martiner?
I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the consent calendar? Any questions from any member? Okay, could we go ahead and vote, please? And that passes 5-0. And now we come back to item number 3 from the consent calendar, the Human Services change of mission statement.
Thank you. By way of background, on December 6th, the Human Services Commission revised the Commission's mission statement and is now presenting it to the Council for approval. The Commission determined that the current mission statement needs to be more flexible and inclusive. The current mission statement, which is proposed to be changed tonight, reads, "The goal of the Human Services Commission is to ensure that basic critical needs, parenthesis, food, shelter, clothing, and personal protection, close parenthesis, of the Lompoc citizens are met. The proposed revised mission statement reads, "The goal of the Human Services Commission is to assess community needs and requests and to provide the City Council with recommendations for fiscal support." As previously indicated, the Commission determined that we need more flexibility and inclusive properties to the statement. Human Services Commission Chair Barbara Holt is present tonight, and if you had questions about any debate or discussion that occurred at the Commission level, she's indicated she would be happy to answer them. And that concludes my report.
Barbara, would you like to come up and say a few words about how the Commission made this decision, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and council people, the commission's spent not only the date that Arlene gave you, but we probably spent a good 6 months working on it, trying to get it more user-friendly, and plus the fact that I'm sure all of you are aware that the Human Service Commission sent out a survey in the October billing to ask everybody in the community to respond on where they would like to see the money spent and what their needs are. And in looking at the response to that, what we had before as a mission statement would be pretty hard to fit into what the people in the city of Lompoc are actually requesting. One of the top things they wanted was jobs and a way to do that. There is nothing in that addressed that issue at all. But that's just, off the top of my head. And of course, I didn't come prepared really to say too much. I thought it was going through on the consent calendar, but in material. Maybe, we can give you some idea if you have any questions, They did work hard on it, all of them, as far as that, and trying to come up with something that would be lasting and really fit the city and be more open door type of thing. So.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies, and I thank you so much for staying this late to discuss this item, and my apologies for pulling it last minute as well. I'll make sure to let everybody know ahead of time that was my fault with that. Mostly I wanted it pulled because I'm a little weary of items coming before council that have never been in front of us before and having it on a consent calendar item, which is why I decided to pull it so it could be read in public setting what it was going to be, or what it was and now what it's going to be. My only question for you would be the idea that basic human services are met. Why was that chosen to stay out of the new mission statement?
Why was it taken out of the new mission?
Exactly.
I really can't answer that for you. I think it determines what you think human service is, and everybody interprets it differently. We fund through that particular program a variety of programs, and sometimes, they've come to us for things that don't really fit in the terminology of that human service thing. I want you to know that also before we did this, we also ran it through the city attorney and got some things from him on that. But I can't answer your question exactly, Councilor Costa. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just curious simply because when I was reading the resolution, it uses the idea that human services and the community development block grant funding so that basic human services are met. That's a quote from the resolution. So I was just curious, and it was in the previous one, if that was something that, if we need to edit the resolution then, or, anything in that nature.
Councilmember Lingle.
Yeah. I don't know if this will help Councilmember Acosta, but I'm getting there's two words in these two that stick out. The old statement had the words "to ensure that basic services are met." The proposed statement is to assess the community needs. I think it's, in my opinion, it'd be impossible for a Human Services Commission to ensure that basic human services are met. I mean, we'd all love to say that all human services are going to be met. Unfortunately, we can't do that. I think they do a great job in assessing the need, and then with the monies that the council allows them, they try to distribute that. So they assess the needs, and then to distribute the funds. So what I'm getting out of it is the change was from to ensure basic human services, which it's impossible for you to ensure.
You can't.
No.
I mean,
but your duty, your responsibility is, I'm sorry, to assess the needs.
to assess it and try to meet it as best you can.
Yeah. So
Because you can't.
I hope that helps.
Yeah.
No, and it does. I guess my question then would be, an attempt to ensure, I don't want to get into semantics here. I guess I was just curious where that came from, and you explained it, and thank you.
Well, he did a better job than
as
I
well.
did. Thank you.
Having just gone through this same process when I served on the County Human Services Commission and spent 2 days trying to come up with our revised mission statement, it is problematic, and frankly, reading yours, I think you came up with a better one than we did in a lot less words. So thank you very much for serving, and I think it was a great job, and please convey that to the rest of the commission. Are there any other comments from the council? Okay, seeing none, we go ahead and vote on this, please. Error, rewind. That's twice today. I think you should make it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we accept the revision to the Human Services Commission mission statement.
I'll second it.
Okay, now we're going in the right direction. It's been moved and seconded to accept the mission statement. Is there any other council discussion? And we go ahead and vote, please. And that passed unanimously. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the public hearing for the annual SB 1693 compliance report for AB 1600 development impact fees, and it'll be our Management Service Director, Brad Wilkie.
Thank you. Mayor, council members, audience members here and at home. This report is in to meet the requirements of Government Code Section 66006 regarding what is commonly known as the Mitigation Fee Act. Some people know it as AB 1600 fees. Each year we're required to report within 6 months of the end of our fiscal year the various balances in each of the fee categories that we take fees in on. In our case, June 30th, 2010 was the end of the fiscal year, so this is due by December 31st. There are 8 elements to each reporting requirement according to the code section 66006, and as I mentioned, we have 11 separate types of fees that we collect. One thing I'd like to point out is on attachment number 6 and attachment number 7, one of the items that was supposed to be reported was the percent of the entire project, the ratio of the funds paid for by the fees compared to the entire project. And for those two activities, I left out that percentage. For the park improvement fees, 56% of the overall playground costs that were spent from the fees. 24% of the lighting costs were paid for by the fees. And for the community recreation center fees, 27% of the overall costs were paid for by the fees collected from AB 1600 fees. I prepared a few slides that give an overall review of each of the items for each of the fees that we have collected, so I'll go through those real briefly. The information I'm presenting here is in the staff report. It just provides a little bit better representation for the audience. In total, these are the fees that we've collected for some as far back as 1989, some more currently. The fee study and the resolution that applies currently was last adopted in 2003. You'll note that there are 2 balances that are negative for the water system fee and the wastewater system fee. That's primarily due to the fact that we borrowed money to do the infrastructure improvements. So in the general case for most of the fees, we collect the fees until such time that we have enough fees to do the work. So we're just doing it in the opposite manner for the water and wastewater fees, primarily because of the needs of the systems to have an adequate capacity for existing development as well as new development. I'll go through each one of these in more detail. Some of the elements that have to be reported are the basic description of the fee, the balances, beginning balances, ending balances, and the activity during the year. So this presents most of the elements that need to be reported that go back to the attachments that are in the staff report. Traffic signal fees are for new signals that are needed throughout the community. We had $1,334,000 at the beginning of the year, collected about $23,000, had interest earnings of about $8,000, no project costs, no refunds, with an ending balance of $1,366,000. At this point in time, it's anticipated sometime in the next 5 or 6 years that we will be putting in additional signal lights as the demand requires. So there's no expected expenditures over the near term. The next one is street improvement fees. As it says, it's to do general improvements that are scheduled out in the AB 1600 report. Again, we had about $2 million collected at the beginning of the year, $88,000 during the year, interest of about $12,000, and the ending balance of $2,181,000. This is also the fee that was, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a fee that was suspended to try to encourage growth during the year. The $88,000 was collected before that suspension was implemented. Bikeway fees, we had $10,000 at the beginning of the year, a small amount of money collected and interest earned, and $12,000 at the end of the period. There's no anticipated major projects to be used by this in the next several years. Fire facilities and equipment fees, $51,000 was on hand at the beginning of the year. As you can see, about $3,700 fees collected, a little bit interest, and the ending amount of about $55,000. The interest here is actually negative because of adjustments we had to make to interest during the year. Parkland fees, we had $283,000 at the beginning of the year, $3,700 of fees collected, and an interest adjustment negative of about $1,300 with an ending balance of $286,000. This is the first one we had actual project expenses for the park improvement fees. We had $400,000 on hand at the beginning of the year, collected $154,000, had interest of $5,000. The $81,000 of project costs I've identified down below are from, playground improvements, and I don't remember exactly which park, I think at Ryan Park, and then ball field lighting improvements at JM, Ryan, and Thompson Parks. The community recreation center fees, we had $161,000 at the beginning of the year, $37,000 collected during the year, a little bit of interest. The project costs, the $22,580 represents principal and interest that we're paying on what is commonly called, we here call the Chevron project, which is providing funds to do many different types of energy efficiency and upgrades in efficiency for several city facilities all over town. This amount is specifically for the center over on the recreation center over on Maple. Library facilities and material fees, we had $117,000 at the beginning of the year, a small adjustment from a prior year, $22,000 collected in fees, about $500 of interest, and an ending available balance of $139,000, almost $140,000. These fees can be used for upgrades to the facilities, and it could also be used if the council desires, for instance, on the Charlotte's Web facility. Police facilities and vehicle fees, the beginning balance was $67,000, collected $16,000 of fees, about $600 in interest, with an ending balance of $84,600. There's no major commitment of any of the fees that we know of right now going forward. The next two fees for water and wastewater, this is kind of a description of what is different about these fees compared to the other ones that I mentioned earlier. The bond fees for the bonds used to pay for the improvements effectively prepaid the monies that we're going to be getting from new development to pay down that. So this is almost opposite from all the rest of the fees that we're collecting. We're just paying down the already committed expenditures that we've spent from bond proceeds. As new customers enter into the systems, they will pay their impact fees, which will effectively pay back a portion of the bond fees, the bonds that were paid, to make them equal with all the other customers that have been paying from the time the bonds were approved in their customer usage fees. Having said that, the beginning balance of the water system fees is a negative $2,127,000. We added $423,000, which is the portion of the bond debt that was determined to be attributable to new development based on the impact fee study of 2003. We also had an additional $122,000 that we refunded back to a developer. We discovered during the year that we had overcharged that developer. Effectively, we were charging them on lots twice, and that was discovered through a joint effort between the water department and the developer. So we researched that during the year and determined that they were owed back the $122,000. So they paid twice that much, so the amount that they've paid is now the correct amount. The next one is the wastewater system fees. The beginning balance is a negative $446, about $2,800 of fees collected. Project cost, again, which is the component of debt service that is attributable to new development, was $390,000, and there was a small amount of refunds related to the water fees paid back to that same developer, with an ending balance of about $845,000 negative. For both this and the water fees, by the end of the term of the bonds, which is effectively 30 years from now, if the amount of development happens that was anticipated with the development impact fees, these numbers will end up being zero. It's a timing issue, and at this point in time, with no development occurring, the component of the bond fees is still accruing to the fees for water and wastewater. Last one is the refuse container fee. There was no beginning balance. We collected $966, and we spent $966. And this one is slightly different than the rest. New development pays for the containers that go into that new home. As soon as that new home is built, those containers are bought and delivered to the home for use. So there's no real delay in the time of how much money we have to collect to buy those, because for each individual house or each individual commercial establishment, we collect enough to pay for the containers to be put into that location. So it's almost a pay-as-you-go effect. That is it for the summary of the attachments. There is more information on each of the attachments, But that's the primary information that's being conveyed is the amount of fees that are in those accounts and that has been used for the accounts and collected for the accounts. That's the completion of my staff report. I'm available for questions.
Councilmember Martiner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand this is a compliance report that you have to do and explain where the fees are and so forth. One of the things that bothers me with many of these reports that we get is that we actually have some monies, and these monies are not being expended. For example, we have in the traffic signal fee category, we have $1.3 million. Why are we spending them? I mean, if you look around town and if you drive around town, you will see traffic signals that look dilapidated, that don't make this town look any better. So why are they not being spent? Where does the decision come in to do that? I am asking Mr. Wilkie, and I would like the staff to give me an answer right now.
In my small amount of research into some of these activities, this is not to maintain existing signals. This is to build new signals.
Okay.
So for those areas that we have designated for traffic signals, those will be put in when the traffic.
So this is monies that are being allocated to put aside for future development.
Yes.
There is nothing on maintenance to the existing.
Right.
AB 1600 is all for future development.
Yes.
All of it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I stand corrected. Thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
I have a few questions for you, Brad. I know that the street impact fee was suspended. Is that currently still under suspension?
Yes.
And have we attempted to do that with any others to incentivize new development?
The direction that was given to the development staff was that one item. And I believe that was because part of those fees for the street improvements is for some activities that are as far out as 30 years from now. Right. So some of the other items, like the signals, could be much closer than that. So that was, I think, one of the reasons why that one item was targeted as being able to be suspended, because we have such a long time frame to recoup that before those items that are planned are going to be put into place.
That makes sense. My other question would be, is this, when we're talking about the word development, does that mean a brand new development, or does that mean an expansion on something? Or if somebody demolishes their home and rebuilds a brand new home where an old one was existing, what does development mean exactly in this context?
Well, the easy answer is a new single-family home. That's pretty obvious. If a place is expanded and that expansion triggers some of the fees, for instance, on a commercial development, some of the water and wastewater fees are based on fixture units. So if that happens, and that could be a trigger even on an expansion of something that is already existing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Yeah, thank you. I got a question on these bonds. We took out a bond, obviously, against our water and wastewater impact fees. These are, you said, are to be used for development. Was that what these were used for, or this bond was used for what?
Well, there are several bonds, actually. They were used to build several items for both the water and wastewater fees. Example are at least one well, there could be more, I can't remember, at least one of the storage units that's up on the hills. And the biggest item that was in that is the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. So these are items that the upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant is a really good example, because that was effectively required of us to build a new plant to meet the new discharge requirements for the water board. So we had to build a new plant. So the bonds and a loan through the state revolving fund were obtained back in 2005, 2007, and 2008 or so. And these were used not just for new development, but also primarily for existing infrastructure. So the bonds themselves are built so that the ongoing user fees that are paid by everybody on a monthly basis is the repayment mechanism for those bonds. But from the impact fee perspective, there is a component of the infrastructure that was built that is there to allow for new construction, new development. So as new development comes in, it pays off that component. But from the point of view of the bonds, to ensure that the bondholders will get paid, the revenue stream that is used to support those bonds is almost entirely the monthly revenue stream from customer user fees.
Okay, when do we determine that we're going to spend police facility and vehicle impact fees?
That's part of the impact fee study, which I didn't go into that in depth, but I could get that information for you fairly quickly after the meeting.
Yeah, I was just curious because we showed what $84,000 there, and if we're not going to build homes for the next 2 years or whatever, so with the parks money that we have set aside, what do we plan for that?
Well, again, the impact fee report itself delineates to some specificity the items that are going to be built with those fees, in addition to fees from other sources. So I didn't look into the fee study itself to find out what those items are, but I do have a copy of the fee study that should provide that information fairly readily.
Thank you, Brad.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Wilkie, Councilmember Starbuck was sort of going on a way down a path that I thought he was going to take that I wanted to go down, so let me continue that. The funds that we have, do we have any flexibility as to which funds they are? Do we select these funds? Are we directed to select these 8 or 9 funds?
Well, in the impact fee study that was done in 2003 and prior impact fee studies that were done, I mentioned in 1989 that we enacted our first development impact fee, which was only a fire impact fee. So since that time, as we've done more and more studies, we've identified more and more individual type of activities that we want to collect fees for. So I would presume that over time that we went from that 1 up to what we have now is the 11, and it was more of a decision process on our behalf than it is something mandated that says you have to collect fees on these types of activities.
Okay, so we have the flexibility of which funds. We also then would have flexibility as to the percentage put into each fund.
From collections, from impacts, from new development, the amount of the fee changes each year by a construction cost index. The basic fee structure, though, is designed and from that impact fee study. So the fee study determines what improvements or what facilities or what equipment should be purchased that will provide that benefit to new development. But it's not only new development that's paying for that.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is, when I'm looking at this, we have a large amount of money going into parks and recreation, basically, which I'm not against parks and recreation, so don't get me wrong, but we are not mandated by anything to provide parks. I mean, we want to, we'd like to, but we are mandated to provide public safety. Yet we have very little amount of money from our impact fees going into public safety. I know there's been discussions of possibly a new fire station sometime in the future. But with what do we have here, $88,000, that might buy a front door for it. So where would we go if we want to do something, this council or sometime in the future, to restructure something to get more funds going into public safety and less funds going to parks? For a city our size, it's my opinion, we have many parks. And I love the parks. We've got beautiful parks. Parks are expensive to maintain. So if we wanted to do something, how would we go about doing this, directing more money towards public safety and less money towards parks?
Well, let me take a crack at that. There is a process in state law dealing with AB 1600 that you go through to make the determinations of what amount of money goes into what category, and that the study that that Brad is talking about that you do periodically, you establishes the fee for each category. And when this was established last time around, there was a shortage on the parkland side based on our Quimby Act numbers, and so more was allocated to that as a result of that. And the process would be to go back and redo the AB 1600 study and then bring it to the council, and it would be a decision of how we wanted to place the emphasis within certain requirements that are made by the state.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. One other example of that is, again, I haven't looked at the actual impact fee study for the fire, what it is that was identified in the impact fee that we are putting aside money for the fire facilities. But in other jurisdictions, on the police side, for instance, we're not putting money aside for a brand new police station because we have a police station that can arguably provide for enough space even if we added, say, 5,000 new homes. What that 5,000 new homes does add is the requirement to have one or two or some number of new vehicles and equipment to outfit officers to patrol. The fees can't pay for the new officers, but they can pay for the vehicles and equipment that is being used by those officers. So that's one reason why the police fee amount seems to be smaller than what the park fees is, because until we can identify that we need to build a new fire station or a new police station, those are probably not in that 2003 fee study. And then, therefore, the fees that we're collecting on a per house basis is fairly small compared to the fees that we're collecting on for new park facilities.
Okay. Yeah, I think I understand that. I just think maybe sometime in the very near future we may want to take a look at this, because it does seem to be disproportionate, the amount of money we're doing right now into parks as opposed to police and fire, public safety.
And I don't know if a new fire station was contemplated in the 2003 fee study, yeah. But typically the fees that are able to be used on fire and police, most of fire and police is salary and benefits. It's not the not exactly new things that are needed. So,
okay, thank you.
Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going back to the parks, for some reason, back in 2003 or somewhere when this study was done, we determined that we needed more parks, and we accumulated $480,000 worth of monies. What is it that we need to trigger to actually spend that money? That assumes that we would have to have X number of new children in town, or new homes, or what? I mean, what is the trigger?
I'm not an expert on that part of it, but I'm pretty sure it's based on number of homes, because that fee is not something I think is charged to commercial properties.
So it totally doesn't make sense that if back in 2003 we were projecting that we needed more parks because we needed more people, but we didn't project that we were going to need more police department and a new fire station. So again, I don't understand how we can go and determine that we need money for this, that is parks and not public safety, if it is based on the population of the town. Right. So there is some disconnect as to how this has happened, and I don't think we're going to solve the problem here. And I don't know who did the study. I'm sure we must have hired somebody to do this study at one point in time. What I really want to focus is, how do we spend that money? I mean, that money has been collected. It is taxpayers, if you want to call it whatever. I don't want to have it sitting there collecting interest, and I want it to go back to the community. And how we can make that happen. I mean, are we going to have to attract 10,000 additional people to move into town so we can spend this money?
Well, The answer to that, I think, is an impact fee study itself and the implementation schedule of what those fees that are being collected are for. So I think a lot of the answers to what you're asking would be in that fee study itself. So
my next question would be, how much is it going to cost us to do a new fee study? And if so, do we have it in the budget? And if so, should I make a motion right now that we should take care of this somehow?
Well, this item is just relating to the compliance issue of reporting
totally
on the
understand
items.
that.
If you want to start the process of doing a new fee study, that would be probably something you might want to bring up in your December 28th meeting for goals and objectives.
Any ideas how much does it cost to do one of these studies?
I didn't take a look at what the 2003 fee was on that study. I can't hazard a guess right now what it would be for a study at this point in time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dangles the money in front of us politicians and we want to spend it, don't we? Trying to lighten the mood, see some more smiles out there, I don't know. Anyway, I reviewed the AB 1600 development impact fees information as provided by the League of California Cities. And so to discuss a little bit of maybe what Bob and somewhat of, Councilmember Lingle and Councilmember Martner were speaking of, part of the issue is the fee itself cannot exceed the, quote, reasonable cost of providing service unless approved as a special tax by 2/3 of the electorate. So it's tough to say we should put, this fee for public safety should be this large and then parks should be this small if they're not proportionate, because you're going to come up with an issue. So the fee can't exceed the reasonable cost. But the other question I actually had for you, Mr. Wilkie, was in reading about AB 1600, a lot of the wording that I was reading is that this fee for applicants can be used in connection with can be used to defray all or portion of the cost of public facilities related to the project. So, for example, if you have a new development in the center of town and you already have 2 streetlights there, this isn't a new streetlight you need to build. However, there's going to be increased traffic, and so that's where I guess my question would be: is if that was on the city of Lompoc in the way that we did set up our fee system, or if that's state mandated where we can not use those funds for general upkeep of certain items that are affected by new development.
My understanding is only for new construction of new facilities. So if somebody builds something right in the middle of town and there's more traffic, the street impact fee that we collect can be used to improve the street near that development, or it could be used to improve, say, H or Ocean. That would help the flow of traffic throughout the town to make everything work more smoothly.
But you can't build you can't maintain a street light that may need...
Right. Operation and maintenance of that street light is not something that can be paid for by impact fees.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
But you would still collect the impact fee for the street light, even though it couldn't be used for that.
Because there would be street lights in that community that will... The fee is for all the street lights in town that need to be eventually built. So as new development happens, it doesn't happen right where that street light's going is planned to be. But as we build out, those traffic patterns predict that we'll have, these places will have the new traffic signals. And that's actually kind of beyond what it is that I'm working on, because all those kind of things that you're asking are more related to the engineering department. And they would be able to give you examples out of the impact fee study that we did. These are the projects that we are planning on doing that are the basis for the impact fee that we're collecting. And that is the information that I don't have with me right now.
So you're basically telling us that we shouldn't be beating you up, but we should be beating up Larry back there.
I'll try my best, but...
That's really what we need to be doing.
I don't have any questions for you. I studied this quite a bit a while back, and it is a subject in our forthcoming workshop. I don't know if we'll get to it on this one or the one after, but AB 1600 is on there. And one of the things that I learned reading the report you're talking about was that there was a great deal of emphasis placed on parks and facilities and land acquisition at that point in time, because at that point in time it was a more pressing need. I was dismayed when I read it that we had on the shelf at that time an expansion for the police department over the parking lot because they were out of space, and we proceeded to build more houses, and we didn't really fund their expansion. And with regard to fire response times, we were building further and further out, and we were out of our response range, and we chose not to fund a fire station, which in the AB 1600 state section that Councilmember Costa looked at, it basically gave the exact example of you're expanding out and you need to build a facility or you need to relocate a facility. But those were all things that were done by a consultant, and I believe we could probably do it in-house this time. We have the framework to do it. So I don't have any other questions other than questions from the council.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council receive the report as prepared to satisfy Government Code Section 66006.
We need public comment.
Yeah, you're you got a little too fast on that one. Are there any other questions for Mr. Wilkie at this point? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilkie. Now, who would like to come and comment on this subject? Nobody. Okay. Seeing no one rise, we'll move back to Mr. Lingle's motion. Mr. Lingle, would you care to make your motion?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that City Council receive the report prepared to satisfy Government Code Section 66006.
Councilmember Martiner?
I second.
Thank you. Now, is there any other discussion that anyone would like to have on this subject? Seeing no one's light on, could we please vote? And that passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Now for new to business. We will have the Redevelopment Agency Annual Financial Report. And this report is, again, something that is required by state law, and it is of a report in nature, not necessarily something we are going to take action on. And Linda, would you like to?
Honorable Mayor, Chair, Council, Board members, and audience, staff is here tonight to present the Redevelopment Agency Annual Report for fiscal year 09-10. The annual report consists of the financial transactions, audit, and housing activities of the agency during the period of July 1st, 2009 through June 30th, 2010. Redevelopment law requires this report be submitted to the State Controller's Office and the Department of Housing and Community Development no later than December 31st, 2010. Housing activities of the agency this year included the completion of the largest agency-assisted housing project to date and the largest obligation of redevelopment housing set-aside funding since the inception of the redevelopment agency. The Home Base on G Street project completed in May 2010 and consisted of a 39-unit single-room occupancy housing project with commercial office space on-site for support services. The project is located at 513 through 519 North G Street. The agency financed $250,000 in housing set-aside funds, $800,000 in CHAFA 1 funding, and the city financed $900,000 in City of Lompoc Housing Trust funds, as well as $150,000 in city home funds, making total agency and city funding of this project at $2.1 million. The agency also obligated the largest amount of redevelopment funds ever committed by the agency to 2 affordable housing projects in May of 2010. The agency board obligated $1.3 million in funding to the Cypress Court project located at 1420 East Ocean Avenue, and $1.75 million to the Housing Authority's Santa Rita Hills project located at 815 West Ocean Avenue. Santa Rita Hills is slated to submit their application for tax credits in the upcoming March 2011 funding cycle, with Cypress Court project following in the July 2011 round. This obligated funding will assist the agency in resolving last year's excess surplus condition. A major accomplishment of the agency last year was the agency's issuance of a tax allocation bond for approximately $8,385,000, which produced net bond proceeds of approximately $7,448,000. The bulk of these funds will be used for the development of the Dick Dewey Senior Community Center and the dehumidification system and rehabilitation work at the Lompoc Aquatic Center. The remainder of the bond funding will be available to other allowable redevelopment projects within the project area. Other agency activities last year included the continuation of pre-development work for the Dick Dewey Senior Community Center and the Lompoc Valley Aquatic Center dehumidification project, as well as the award of the Old Town Structural Building Assessment contract to Kenna Engineering, who is underway with the preliminary assessment work as we speak. The agency also continued work at the site of the storage and parking facility across from Fire Station 1 by completing the demolition work of a dilapidated house at that site. Staff recommends the City Council accept and file the Redevelopment Agency's annual report of financial transactions and annual audit and annual report housing activity, and staff further recommends the Redevelopment Agency Board accept the annual report of financial transactions, annual audit, and the annual report of the housing activities, and authorize staff to submit said documents to the State Controller and the Department of Housing and Community Development, and adopt the that's it. I believe that is the two actions the City Council and the Board needs to take at this time, and that concludes my presentation.
Councilmember Starbuck?
Mrs. Wortman, you knew you weren't going to leave easily there.
I thought I'd try.
I have 4 things I wanted to talk about real quick. This is a very extensive report, and these are general questions. I read in here the Commercial Facade Improvement Program for redevelopment. We did 0. We didn't fund any commercial rehabilitation. We had 1 incomplete application for a seismic retrofit, and we budgeted $40,000 for economic development. I'm curious, these are big programs that should be taken advantage of, and I'm curious why nobody is. And the last one is what did we use the $40,000 on economic development, if you could find it in this big pile here?
Well, I think part of the redevelopment funds was used for I need to check my budget, but there were, I think some of the SEDS money was used for that.
Being the economic development person of the moment, perhaps I can help with this because Linda can't be expected to know the details of that huge budget. What we have done so far is we did use $5,000 to update the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. This is a document that enables Lompoc as part of an area of the county to be eligible for federal funds. We also spent approximately, I believe it came up to about $8,000 on the CalEd team. Basically, there's an honorarium you pay them, but you also pay their travel and accommodations and meal expenses. To date, that has been what we have spent it on. And as far as expenditure of the rest of the funds, that the council has directed us to update the website and do things that we can do with existing staff resources. So those are our expenditures to date on the economic development portion of it.
Do you have any?
I'm still really curious about it says here that there was that you spoke at several local economic development and business events, but were the businesses just not responsive to it, or it seems to me like if there's that kind of money available with the interest rates that you would provide them, that people would be on this, and the seismic retrofit never did follow up?
I'm currently waiting for the URM assessment from the Canna Engineering Group, and when we get the cost analysis from them, the applicant who did apply for seismic retrofit we will be able to continue to complete his application and move forward with his project. As far as the commercial facade and commercial rehab funds, it's a big problem trying to get the funds out because a lot of people aren't expanding because of the current economic climate, but we do need to do a lot more with trying to market our programs to the community and try to entice them to take advantage of some of this funding. But again, it's up to the property owner, and because of the current economic times, several property owners are they're really not wanting to move forward with over-debting, putting more debt on their properties.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that you touched on this briefly, but I was looking at the final page of the document where the finding as of June 30th, 2009, the agency has excess surplus in the low moderate fund in the amount of $1,043,981. Mm-hmm. And the recommendation is that we should prepare an appropriate course of action, and I was just curious as to what that would be.
Last year, a excess surplus plan was adopted by the board, and it does identify that several different projects the agency could expend funds on. Since that time, we have also with the obligation of funds or the designation of the funding for Cypress Court at $1.3 million, as well as Santa Rita Hills at $1.175 million. That is our primary big funding to address the excess surplus issue. We also have $350,000 in funding that is, we are awaiting loan execution currently with NEO, a group that is slated to buy foreclosed homes and resell them to low-income households.
Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a little bit of deja vu for me because I think about a year ago I was asking the same questions that Councilmember Starbuck was. It's like, we have all of these programs and nobody's using them. We were exactly in the same place a year ago. And I was quite, sort of felt the same way, dissatisfied with the answers that, nobody is taking advantage of these programs. Having talked to some members of the community, having talked to some business owners, I have found out that really they're more interested in immediate things like building their capital so they can sell goods and they can make some money, as opposed to improving their facade just simply because that's where we are today in the economy. My question to you is, can any of these programs be shifted to today's economy? Can any of this be in any way be channeled to satisfy the present needs of today, in the commercial front particularly?
Through the mayor or the chair, since it's redevelopment money, the state law in essence requires redevelopment money to be used for brick and mortar type improvements. There are certain kinds of equipment that can be used, or certain kinds of public improvements that can be that the money can be used for, but for private activities, it's typically brick and mortar that the money can be used for.
Okay, so, but it has to be applied through a private owner. So it's not that the city could take on a project. Let's say the city decides to buy some vacant lot and decides to build up and make a co-op. You know, everybody's talking about co-ops today. If we could just get some place in which we can get a bunch of people that they can start their businesses.
An agency, the agency tax increment money can't be used for a new building. It can be used for assisting with facade improvement or some additional building on an existing building or tenant improvements in an existing building, but it can't be used for a new building. Okay. Unless it's a new public building.
Okay, so if we were to purchase a piece of property in Lompoc, the city purchases a piece of property in Lompoc that is blighted, and can the city use these monies to improve their property and then, whatever, lease it out to potential business owners? Is that a program that could be?
If the property had a current building on it and the money was being used to refurbish that existing building, then yes. If it was to buy the property with an old building and tear down the old building, yes, the redevelopment agency money could be used to demolish the old building, but once the new construction started, it couldn't be redevelopment money.
Once the new construction, okay. So if we were to build, okay, for example, the old pool, could we use RDA's monies to demolish the old pool?
We can definitely use redevelopment money to demolish public or private property.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And then we could leave it vacant because we couldn't use RDA's monies to build something on it. We could landscape it.
That's a public build. The pool is a public building, so actually you could because it's a public building.
Yes,
okay.
As long as it would remain a public building.
Right.
Okay.
We could demolish and reconstruct.
Okay.
With the proper findings.
Aren't we thinking about things, or is this all has to be basically dictated by the council? Does the council have to take on the task to say, RDA, would you look for potential new ways to fund and remove blight within the community that does not rely on the business owner and the new facade improvement program, because that's not working and it hasn't been working in the last 2 years?
I'm sure council can give direction to the city administrator if that is a council or agency board priority, and the city administrator, executive director could direct staff to do so.
Can you guys come up with some ideas and bring them up to the council since you're the experts? I mean,
Sure.
I think that way kind of works too, right?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to the Lompoc Theater, I was attending council meetings, and when I was listening to the issues between ownership of LHCDC and the RDA monies that was put aside for that project, and the reason that those monies weren't used was because there was no project to use those in the future. Is that correct?
The reason the funding wasn't used was because LHCDC had put the project on hold, and there wasn't sufficient funding overall to go forward with the project. So the money was reverted back to Old Town funding source, so it could still be used for the theater or any other project in the Old Town. But because the money wasn't being used, LHCDC did not have sufficient funds to move forward on the project at that time. That's why it was redirected into a fund that could be used by other projects, as well as the theater, if and when they would be ready to move forward.
And through the chair, as to that last, a specific resolution was passed by the council of the agents, I don't recall, indicating that they would be willing to put money into the theater if a project came forward that was a reasonable, feasible project.
Right, but the issue becomes the awarded amount wouldn't be enough, obviously, to do the renovation there at the Lompoc Theater. That's why there's a stall, because we need more outside funding to supplement.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Come on back.
I'm sorry. I have one last question, and it just triggered my mind. As far as LHCDC, I thought that one of the reasons why they're not receiving any more money is because they haven't been able to complete their applications because they don't have the financials, the audits. Or am I confusing this project with another project?
That is correct. At this time, LHCDC is non-compliant in all of their
financial audits
projects.
I mean, I've been told that the financial audits are non-existent.
They do not have current financials for that organization.
So they don't qualify to receive monies at this time until they come forth with the financials. Am I correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll open it up for public comment. Who would like to speak on this item?
Honorable Mayor, Council members, Nick Gonzalez, resident, City of Lompoc. Councilwoman Martiner asked the question is why, and several of you, why the money for commercial facade or commercial improvements hasn't been used. And I know personally I've just acquired an interest in the area, and one of the items I was considering was, well, how could I utilize this money? Because I know that there's money available. But one of the things that kind of turned me away was the duration of the covenant that's associated with the money. If I go out to the private sector and I take out a loan and borrow money for, say, 10 years and I pay it off, well, then I'm through with the bank. I don't have to deal with the bank. In my understanding, one of the items, and it's been the same kind of issue with several property owners, and I don't know that there's a way around it. Linda would be better to address that, was does the covenant have to exceed the time of the loan? In other words, do you have to have a covenant on your property for a time frame that goes beyond the time you owe the city money? That was one item. Then jumping back on RDA funds, I've been up here several times as an advocate, especially in light of the fact that our construction industry has been hit very hard with unemployment, in that today I spoke extensively with the executive director of Home Corporation in Oxnard, and this individual has done some extensive work with first-time buyer programs and brought in additional funding from federal and state agencies on top of what they had on the local level. And again, that's the down payment and then money for repairs. It addresses a large part of the redevelopment agency. It puts local contractors back to work. It addresses blighted properties, foreclosed properties. The RDA did one aspect, but in ownership, with the direct down payment and the ability for the homeowner to do what they want to do, might be something else to consider. And I know that there's a certain amount of set-aside money that's required for the RDA to spend. It's 20% for the low and very low housing, but I don't know if that's additional money can go, if it has to be the minimum of 20, or if you can put a little bit more. That also would help stabilize values by bringing more buyers in, which stabilizes your property tax base, triggers sales tax as people buy things for their homes. So there's something that you can do. Thank you.
Who would like to speak next? Seeing no one rise, we'll close public comment and come back to the council. With regard to what Mr. Gonzalez was just speaking about, I spoke with staff earlier, and as an example, if we proceeded with the down payment assistance program that we did discuss in our previous workshop and had staff coming back to us with additional information, there's about $1.2 million that is unallocated in the side of the project that goes for low-income housing. So there is that money generally available now. It would need to be unallocated from some other projects and allocated to this, but that is a decision that the agency board would make. We also have money on the commercial side sitting there looking for a purpose, and to Council Member Martiner's discussion, many redevelopment agencies have done in the past, purchased property, torn down dilapidated buildings, installed infrastructure to bring the utilities current to the property, transformers and many other things to make it basically a shovel-ready site. In some cases, streets have been put in. If if additional streets were needed. So all of the public infrastructure needs are an opportunity. And in a lot of cases, consolidating different size parcels into a larger parcel that's more usable, or removing buildings, and in some cases that can be a very high cost, particularly in the case of old buildings where you have abatement of hazardous materials or a basement to fill. So those are all some of the things that the agency could do, and that's probably another good subject for one of our future workshops. Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mrs. Wortman, can I ask you to come up and address Mr. Gonzalez's question about that time past the loan repayment to the city? Yeah, the covenant.
Currently, it is a maintenance covenant that the redevelopment agency records on the property, and the maintenance is double the term of the loan. So if the loan is for 5 years, the maintenance covenant is for 10 years. And we really don't see a hindrance of recording a covenant to maintain the properties, because every property owner should want their property maintained to a level where there's, no health or safety issues, or that their property and their investment is kept in good repair. So I haven't, after speaking with several people, I haven't really heard that is such an issue, the maintenance covenant. The agency is looking at increasing the amount of grant portion for our programs. So we're looking at maybe increasing them to $5,000 or $10,000 in hopes that our new programs would then be more enticing to some property owners. And that should be coming back to you folks next year, early next year some point.
Great, thank you so much.
As a maintenance covenant, are we obligated by law to do that, or is that just our general policy over time?
I'll let Joe handle that.
The goal of redevelopment in the redevelopment law is to remove blight and to do what you can to not have blight reoccur. And so that was the goal of the maintenance covenant, is to do something to ensure that the property is maintained.
So that's an obligation of law, or that's our take on how we can accomplish this? Is this something most redevelopment agencies do, I guess is the question. And is the fact that it's twice the term of the note fairly common, or is there some variance in that from agency to agency?
There's variance from less time to even more time.
Okay. So we would have the option to go in any direction within a reasonable bound?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have a question? Would someone care to make a motion? Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the City Council accept and file the Redevelopment Agency's annual report of financial transactions, annual financial audit, and annual report of housing activity.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second it.
Councilmember Starbuck. Is there any further discussion from the council?
Mr. Mayor, there's also a board action that's needed.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Costa, was your intent to take both actions?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Starbuck, was your intent to second both actions?
Yes, it was.
Is that satisfactory, City Attorney? Thank you. Is there any further discussion from the council? Okay, let's vote, please. And that passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, where did we leave off? Number 8. And we have our building official, Bruce Taylor. Bruce?
Honorable Mayor, council members, ladies and gentlemen. The recommendation is to introduce ordinance number 157410 to include mandatory state building requirements in the Lompoc Municipal Code and streamline existing code provisions. California Building Code is published every 3 years by order of the California Legislature. Once adopted by the state, these building standards have the force of the law and take effect 180 days after publication. The City of Lompoc is required to enforce the 2010 code provisions. The effective date for the 2010 triennial edition of the California Building Standards Code, California Code of Regulations, Title 24, Parts 1 through 12, is January 1 of 2011. Cities and counties have the authority to modify those standard codes as reasonably necessary due to climatic, topographical, or geological conditions locally. The proposed ordinance amends the Lompoc Municipal Code to adopt the model codes adopted and published by the state. The purpose of the building codes to establish minimum requirements necessary to protect health, safety, and general welfare of building occupants and the public by regulating building construction. This triennial period, there have been two significant changes in the building codes. One was the inclusion of the new residential code based upon the International Residential Code. And this deals with the regulations and design concepts associated with single-family units, duplexes, and townhomes that are 3 stories or less in height. In addition, this code requires new residential buildings, including single-family units, to have fire sprinklers, carbon monoxide detection systems, and arc fault circuit interruption protection systems to protect against circuit fires. The second significant change to the building codes in this edition is the addition of Part 11 to the Title 24 group. It's the California Green Building Standards Code. This code is geared towards providing healthier environments for occupants based on the materials of construction within and without the building, and creating more efficient buildings by lowering water usage and consumption. Other state changes to the standard building codes are technical modifications to meet new technologies and information, definition of terms, and changes in wording for clarification. The recommended actions will result in no financial impact, to the city's general fund. The cost to administer is captured through the city's master fee schedule and the building permit fees. However, new fees will need to be imposed to cover the additional cost to implement the new residential and green building codes, and staff will be returning to the City Council to address those new fees in the future. Conclusion is the adoption of these codes is required by law and is consistent with the Building Standard Commission's recommendations. If you have any questions,
I'm wondering if you would comment before we have questions. We had recently had a meeting with the contractors, and it seemed to me that as the conversation was replayed, there were more questions than answers. Do you feel like we have any kind of a handle on this yet? I realize it's a rather monumental change. Maybe you could kind of appraise the council of that.
We've been working at, as time permits, of course, on trying to provide more usable information to put on the website and make available at the counter. We're in the process of trying to put together new handouts, which we will require because of the major changes in the code. And in addition to that, we're taking a look at what we can do to make our process more efficient. We're trying to meet with other departments to see where there is overlap and gray areas where we might be able to better identify those areas and help the public get through the processes that go from one department to another, and remove some of the confusion that results from that overlap. This is an ongoing process that, time permitting, we're working on, but at present it's still a work in progress, of course.
My understanding, and you can feel free to correct me, was that the new green building section applies principally to new construction and has a limited impact on remodel. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And the new green building codes, the level of expertise with regard to how those impact construction is somewhat limited at this point in time.
Yes, this the green code is going to have some far-reaching impacts on building in general. Residential, the main focus there is on water usage. They're requiring a 20% reduction across the board in water usage. And the methods that you can employ to demonstrate that are by, they have tables that give you the fixture unit usage for specific types of plumbing fixtures that meet those requirements, or you can use another table and using your projected water usage try to come up with a calculation of a baseline that will fit within their requirements. Outdoor water usage, they're going to have requirements for irrigation controllers that have to be either weather sensitive, that can alter their output of the irrigation system based on needs of the plants, or you're going to have some type of rain sensor incorporated with that. The other issue that, that requirement is going to be for commercial as well, but it's going to be more in depth for commercial. Construction waste reduction, disposal, and recycling is another big issue with the Green Code. There are going to be requirements for filling out forms for how you're going to recycle construction materials, debris from clearing, etc., either for recycling or reuse on site. And they're establishing points where you would mix, where you would take the mixed materials and delineate it out to how it's going to be recycled. You will have to provide a construction waste management plan. The second thing for residential would be a building maintenance and operation. Final inspection, you'll have to provide a manual, some type of media covering all of the appliances, equipment, and so forth in the structure to the owner. Pollution control, they're requiring covering of duct openings and protection of mechanical equipment during construction. They have tables for VOC limits now for adhesives, coatings. They're trying to lower the amount of formaldehyde usage in materials. These are becoming stricter as time goes by. The limits will increase over time in the next few years. Another item is moisture control of building materials. Now we're supposed to require a new construction, prior to covering the framework in a wood frame structure, 3 random samples of moisture content of the framing. And it has to be under 19% moisture content, or we're not allowed to cover it. That's a brand new item, and that circumvents the building code. Another item is indoor air quality and exhaust. Bathroom fans will, unless they're part of a whole house ventilation system, will be required to have a humidistat that can actually control the humidity level in the bathroom air.
Suffice it to say, there are a number of new challenges, and
yes,
we don't want to get down to the how many flushes you get. Councilmember Lingle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. After reading this report and hearing you just now, I'm confident that the state was not at our workshop last week, realizing that we want to become a more business-friendly city.
Well, this was just residential. We haven't even got to the commercial yet.
Okay, so The last paragraph, or the last sentence of the first paragraph, I'm hoping this is some good news to that. It says that we are allowed to have some flexibility to modify these standard codes for reasonably necessary local, climate, geographical, and topographical. Is this telling us that we do have some leeway in the interpretation of these codes?
You can be more restrictive, you cannot be less restrictive.
Okay. So we have some leeway, okay.
Yes.
Then in the discussion, the next paragraph, middle line, third line, middle of the sentence, it says these are minimum requirements necessary. Okay, so the minimum. Okay, and it says that this is only for new construction. So if I want to add on to my home, I don't have to have the fire suppression system put in it.
Not for an addition.
Okay. No. At what instances would I need to? Sometimes people say if you tear down everything except one wall, it's rebuild. Is that true?
Well, you can, if you have to leave at least one wall, obviously, or you don't have anything of the original structure left. That's really pushing the limits of the definition of a structure, actually. Mm-hmm. But that it has occurred.
Okay, so that would be an instance where we have some leeway in the interpretation of this. We could, if I'm just using that as an example, someone wants to build a new home, without going through all of this, they could buy an existing home and, let's say, leave one room standing and then build onto that one room. Possibly.
It would be possible if we'll say if it's a slab structure, that the existing slab would meet the standards for today's construction of a residence. Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I understand this is mandated by state law, and it's something that we are going to have to accept whether we like it or not. But I feel like, personally, I can't go without saying, let's simplify this. There's more codes to follow, more money to build, and more money to pay in fees. So I feel like that's a little bit of government overregulation at its finest. So my hope is, and if I can urge council, that we help citizens transverse these codes and limit what we add instead of making these even harsher for the individuals who are subject to the codes. Thank you.
We actually have not added anything that wasn't previously there in this cycle. The changes that we have made were just in the municipal code for administration purposes. And putting the fee structure in there, and then just the adoption of the required.
That was a statement for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions from the council? Okay, seeing none, thank you, and we'll open this to oral communication. Who of you out there would like to speak on this subject?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Ralph Harmon. I really have a question that came up. Once you're on the planning commission, people seem to think you know something about things, and you don't. But I was asked whether, because mobile homes or modular homes are allowed as infill buildings, are those now going to be required to have sprinkler systems in them? Believe me, I'm all in favor of sprinkling systems, but if you're bringing a mobile home or modular unit in, it's probably not equipped for that. And I'm wondering, is that included? The other thing is on residential sprinkling systems, which believe me, I'm totally in favor of, but they're only as good as they are when they're maintained. And if there's nothing that indicates to the owner that this thing has to be maintained every year or a couple times a year, they may get a false feeling of security. So is that somehow being built into the code too. I mean, nice we have all these things, but if it's not implemented correctly, it can be more of a failure than it is a benefit. Thank you.
With respect to mobile homes or manufactured housing, that falls under the Department of Housing and Community Development, state agency, and also HUD. We do not have any jurisdiction over the construction of those structures. And to answer that question, it's basically up to HCD. If they decide to require sprinklers within those, then yes, that's a requirement. Beyond that, we're limited as to our enforcement capabilities on that. As far as maintaining sprinkler systems, that's a pressurized system, and the sprinkler heads themselves are temperature sensitive. And barring someone repainting and getting paint on the sprinkler head or something of that nature that could impede the ability of it to sense the temperature range, there really isn't maintenance per se on that type of a system. It's not like a fire alarm system that's sensing your detectors and for wiring problems or something of that nature. If you have a leak, you're going to know it. You know, you'll see signs of water. But beyond that, there's virtually no maintenance to those. Well, over a period of years, I suppose you would get sediment buildup, but Chief States would probably be better equipped to answer questions on that than I, as far as scheduled maintenance on those systems.
Say in the new residential code, I believe, I'm still researching and reading, I believe there is a section for maintenance, but there again, once we get into a single family residence, once it's signed off, we don't have authority to go back in to the property anyway unless we're asked to come back in. And there is a drain line on them too, so the homeowner can drain them. Hopefully they close it and keep the system activated, but
I can probably supply a couple tidbits of information on that. One of the things that's a new feature in home sprinkler systems is a cap that goes over to protect the heads, so they're not actually exposed and they look a lot nicer, and the cap melts at a much lower temperature than the sprinkler head goes off. And as it was explained to me on a commercial sprinkler system, when I said, this is just black pipe, don't these things fill up with rust? No, because the water is in there and it has no oxygen content. At a certain point, it can't do anything anymore, and so it's actually just sits there. And that's the way they explained it to me when I asked that question. Is there anyone else who would like to address this issue? No, it's not your turn yet. Okay, seeing no one rise, we'll bring it back to council, and Councilmember Starbuck.
Mr. Taylor, I have a quick question for you. Does the state provide us with a meter that measures the 19% in the wood, or do we have to buy it? And since we're not going to buy that, do we waive that?
No and no.
Everyone's out looking for a woodometer right now. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion on this subject?
Let's see. It looks like we just need to receive this report. I move that we accept the report as written.
We need to introduce the ordinance.
Yeah, no, we got to introduce the ordinance.
Okay, we have. Okay, I move that we introduce the ordinance 1574 parentheses 10, introducing mandatory state building requirements in the Lompoc Municipal Code.
And Councilmember Costa?
I second.
Okay. Is there any other discussion from the council at this time? Seeing none, let's vote. And the passes 5-0, unanimous. Thank you. And the next would be item number 9, and Planning Manager Lucille Breeze.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. This is a request from Mark Anati, representing LB/L DS Ventures, Lompoc, for City Council consideration of an installment payment schedule for impact fees due on the Seabreeze Apartment Building Number 4. The recommendation is for the council to receive and consider the staff report and request, and to direct staff to implement one of the following options. One would be to direct staff to collect the contested $126,176 in impact fees prior to releasing occupancy on the Seabreeze Apartment Building Number 4. 2 would be direct staff to work with the applicant to prepare an agreement to be signed by the city administrator, prepared by the city attorney, and reviewed by the management services/finance director, outlining a payment schedule for the $126,176 in impact fees and security for these payments. 3 would be to direct staff to accept the developer's suggestion for reduction of unpaid impact fees to $43,232 after receiving a credit for street improvement impact fees paid by the developer prior to the city's suspension of those fees, or 4 to provide alternative direction to staff. The Seabreeze apartment project is one that has been approved, and there were 4 individual buildings out in the project area. 2 of the buildings were built and constructed prior to the city suspending the impact fees for street improvement. And those 2 buildings were each charged $41,472, as is shown in the staff report for council. The building number 3 was completed following the suspension, and there was no impact fee charged on that particular building. That building is also occupied. Building number 4 is the final building. There is a total of $126,000 in impact fees, and there is no charge for the street improvement impact fee on that particular building. Mr. Anati is representing DS Ventures, and he has approached the city requesting consideration of possibly 2 options. One option would be that the city would refund the total amount of the impact fee that has been paid on the previous 2 buildings. And the other option would be that he would agree to the amount of impact fees that have been presented to him for the building number 4. However, he would like to have an installment payment, and one of the attachments shows the installment payment that Mr. Anati is suggesting. If the council chose that option, the city attorney would draft a payment agreement, and it would be recorded as a lien on the property. And the impact of that would be on our finance department to accept those payments and to monitor to be sure that they were properly paid. Because building number 4, if that was the option the council chose, building number 4 would be released and occupancy would be granted on it. One of the reasons that occupancy is not granted until all of the fees are paid is that is the final city hold on a building. Once they're released for occupancy, we really have no future hold on that building. These options are explained in the staff report, and we are available for any questions and awaiting your direction.
Thank you. City Attorney, you and I discussed this earlier with regard to a reduction in fees and the consequences that could occur to other projects. Would you elaborate on that, please?
If there are other projects in very like circumstances, then someone may feel that there's a precedent being set by allowing this approach, if the approach was to allow a waiver or a reduction in the fees because of the suspension that the city previously did for fees, then someone could come to the council and request a reduction in their fees. I don't know that I would say that there's an absolute legal requirement that you would have to do that, but there's that possibility.
And my recollection were some other projects that this might apply to.
There's one, as we understand.
Okay. Councilmember Costa, can give me just a second to get one more bit of information up here I think would help us. Mr. Wilkie, could you come up for just a moment? And again, I had a conversation with Mr. Wilkie, and I just want to share it with the council. The impact fees that we're looking at here are those AB 1600 fees that are going to go into suspense accounts that we discussed earlier, correct?
I would think a majority of them are. Some of them could be other type of fees, like Quimby fees, which are not AB 1600, but they all are development-related fees. So.
Something that we're not going to spend the day after tomorrow at any rate. And with regard to the interest rate that is proposed for this note, is this substantially higher than the money we could receive on, or the interest we could receive on that money if we put it in one of our other financial instruments?
Yes.
By a wide margin?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joe, Mr. Pannoni, I have a quick question for you, if possible. From a legal, I guess, standpoint, or perspective, rather, in having this individual pay in full for the first 3 buildings, is that just cause to say that they accept the fee as just? Does that make sense?
They're not. There isn't, as I understand, there isn't an argument or a concern that the developer has that these fees are not appropriately calculated. So they aren't contesting the amount of the fee. They're not saying the fee isn't validly being applied. They're asking for some assistance from the city on how they're going to be collected or the amount to be collected.
Right. The amount to be collected, though, is what I'm referencing here. So there is some contention on the amount to be collected. And my question is, if in the previous 3 instances it was accepted as this was acceptable, then in the 4th instance, I guess in a perfect situation, building this issue would have been brought about building 1, and we would have known that I guess the time lapse. Right. I'm thinking about.
I think to help the fee structure was changed partway through the project, and it accrued to the first 2 buildings, but didn't accrue to the second 2. I'm sorry, which one of you 2 gentlemen first? Councilmember Starbuck.
I don't know if out in the audience if you know what's listed here for the developers Exhibit B, but what he's proposing is 24 payments at a 6% interest rate, which would net the city just a shade over $8,000. I think this would be a good chance for this council to do something in good faith to a developer that's been in good faith with us with these other projects here that he's done, and we should issue the certificate of occupancy. I think it would show a sign that we're at least business friendly. As long as the attorney didn't charge us $8,000, I see this as a win for the city.
You know, Mr. Pannoni, you can comment on that if you'd like.
No worries.
Councilmember Lingle.
Well, that, in all seriousness, that does bring up a good point. There are going to be some expenses involved with this. It's not that we're being given a gift of $8,000. It is going to be taking some attorney's time to draft the document. It's going to be taking time on our city staff, the finance department, to make sure that the payments are made on time. So there there is time involved. It's just not that we're being given a gift of $8,000. I agree with you, Councilmember Starbuck, that we do want to appear to be, not even appear to be business friendly, but we do want to be business friendly, and I'm taking this into consideration. I do have a question for either Mr. Wilkie or Mr. Pannoni. We hold a lien on the property if we allow the developer to make the 24 payments, correct? We have a lien?
That would be ultimately a decision for you to make on approving the agreement, but that would be my recommendation, that we do put a lien. Not a lien, but a deed of trust or something to secure the debt.
Sure. And let's just say, for example, payment number 10 is last payment made. That's due to be made in November of 11. Let's say that for some reason that's the last payment made, and there's just nothing left, and we hold this lien on the property for, let's say, 20 years, and they go to sell the property. Do we continue to accumulate 6% for the next 20 years?
That would be the way I would write the agreement.
Okay, so, I mean, it's not that we're only going to be collecting the $134,000 infinite. Okay, so, okay. Okay.
Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so I guess what I want to understand is the following. I mean, I want to be specific, on December 16, 2009, the council adopted a resolution in which we suspended the fees for a year, for a full year. It's actually going to be expiring in March 31st, 2011, according to the resolution. So what I want to find out, we're gonna give occupancy to Building 3, I assume, or we have already given occupancy to Building 3, 3/20/24/10, correctly? Is that how I'm reading this when it was issued? That building certainly qualifies for the suspension of this fee. What about Building 4? If it's not going to, if we're not going to issue a certificate of occupancy somewhere between now and March 31st, what does that mean about giving them this, waiving the impact fee? Why is 3 and 4 being bundled together when there is only one occupancy that has been issued, which is Building 3?
If I may, the certificate of occupancy will be issued for Building 4.
When?
That, as soon as the agreement gets signed and he promises to make the payments over that period of time.
But that should be on the record, and it should be stated that Building 4 is going to have an occupancy issue before March 31st, 2011, because then we don't, I mean, we might decide on March 31st, 2011 to actually enact these fees again, right? And if Building 4 gets an occupancy issue after March 31st, they're going to get charged $41,000. Okay, so I just kind of want to get it straight in the record that, we should be having an agreement with, I understand, waiving the fees for 2 buildings, Building 3 and Building 4, but only one of them has been given the occupancy, whereas Building 4 has not been given the occupancy, the certificate. So what does that mean? Are they going to occupy this building before?
Whether or not they actually have tenants that would come in to make the deals and occupy the building, I'm not sure, but they will definitely, at least, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to get their...
to build it 20 years from now? I mean, the point is that in a way we're kind of saying you have to do with this time period that this resolution is acting on, or unless we want to say it's open. I mean,
if I could step in.
Let's get Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor, could you come up for a moment, please?
Mr. Taylor, is this building substantially complete and ready for occupancy?
As far as building is concerned, it is.
Okay, so the issue that's unresolved is this issue, the occupancy certificate. They've completed their final inspection, is that what I'm hearing you say? Or close to?
When we do a final inspection and issue a certificate of occupancy, at that point, it's after all of the other departments have signed off on the final form.
So to your knowledge, there are no construction issues remaining with this particular building other than what we might find in a final inspection. It would be of a minor nature.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank
but
you.
to be certain, I would need to go look in the file.
Oh, absolutely.
But I believe that we are finished.
We're close to the final step at any rate.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Lingle.
Unless Ms. Martin wants more clarification, I was just trying to clarify that, but I believe Mr. Taylor did. We're only talking about building number 4. Building 1, 2, and 3 are done. The fees have been paid. Yes, fees have been paid in 1 and 2.
In 1 and 2, but no 3.
Fees have been paid on 3 as well. Yeah, fees have been paid on 3. We're only talking about building number 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, when I saw the street improvement, it says 0 and 0. So building number 3 already has been paid with a reduction of the $41,000.
Yeah, building.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
building 3.
got it.
So we're only talking
Okay.
about building 4.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then, okay, so now, building number 4 will have the reduction because it qualifies within this period, but it does not have an occupancy.
Yeah, I think what Mr. Taylor was saying is that it's ready to be occupied, and this is the last step, and so it's ready to go.
Is that true? So every other department has it all?
Yes, the last step for building number 4 to be released is for this issue of the impact fees to be resolved.
Okay, got you. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if staff can address this question or if our developers here this evening. I'm just curious, in a non-personal manner, of course, why there's an inability to pay at this time.
Direct that to the applicant, to the developer.
Okay.
Would you like to speak to that, sir?
Mayor, City Council members, hi, I'm Mark Anati, represent LBLDS Ventures out on the project out there. A little background why I'm here, while we're in front of the place. All these buildings sit on one lot. It's a single, it's not like a subdivision, it's a single lot with 4 buildings on it. They're individually built. Now, one of the things, if you look at your staff report, they said that basically what has been issued on 3 of the buildings is a TCO, not a C of O. So we don't have a final C of O until all the buildings are 100% complete. The fees were deferred. We requested the fees to be deferred to the C of O. And in our intention, in our perspective, deferring them to the C of O would have eliminated the fees to us at this point in time on the traffic impact fees. Although they were paid prior to when we had the buildings released on building 1 and 2, we paid the fee, but they were paid for a TCO, not a real C of O. So when we came back to do building 4 and finalize building 4, we felt that those fees should be credited because we asked for a deferral to a final C of O. We paid those fees, but now they were during the interim of this construction. All the buildings were built at the same time. It's just right in the middle of this development. These fees got rescinded, and we felt that we should, just because we had put them in trust with the city at that point in time, that they weren't due. The argument is over with as far as that goes. We believe that we still should have those fees credited back to us on building 1 and 2 and why we came up with this dollar amount. Now, going forward, the last thing to do, building 4 is complete. It's ready to go. The only thing to get the final from the building department would be to pay the fees. The building department comes out. They're all identical buildings. So this is the last one. And so every possible thing that's, we've known that on the first 3 buildings that were issues with the finals. We're almost positive that there's, other than maybe something that they come up with. But this will allow the whole project to be all done. And to answer your question more, our anticipation was that the fees would be reduced and we would only have to come up with about $40,000 to finish the job. We're now 3 times that to finish the job. And between the construction loan, the industry, and everything, we can't complete. One of the things is, if anybody understands in construction, we have a construction financing. We need to get in order to get permanent financing on it, we have to get the last building leased up, finished off, done, so that it takes a certain amount of time for the rents to come in and to season for a permanent lender to come in and come over the top of that. We're anticipating that usually takes up to maybe 2 years to do. In the meantime, we're willing to acquiesce to the city, saying, listen, we're part of the community, we're fine, let's not argue anymore. If the fees are meant to be paid for the community, we already paid them, fine, let's move on. We're just asking for help right now as business people so that we can get our building finished off. The anticipation was a third of the dollar amount at the end. Now we're 3 times that amount. It's an economic hardship for us. So on top of that, we're willing to pay the interest on the loan, on the money, in case there's any problems that something doesn't get paid. There's a continuing accruing interest at that dollar amount, so that the city's not out. So the city wins. As far as we're concerned, we're part of this community. We feel that if you can help us out in that regards, I don't think we're asking for a set of precedent, because our feeling still to this day is that we haven't got a C of O on the project. We asked originally to defer it all the way to the C of O, and we should be under those rules right now of not having to pay the fee. But that said, I think we're willing to compromise and help the city out. So hopefully, if you have any questions, please ask. I think hopefully that cleared up everything.
So you view this as a fair compromise?
Yes.
That solves your problem and takes care of the city, and when we can move forward together.
And we're part of the community, so we're more than happy.
Thank you very much.
Yes?
I think Councilmember Martner.
Yes, I want to go back to this table. Councilmember Lingle, the street improvement impact fee was not paid on Building 3. So my question still remains, it's not regarding your comment or anything of that sort. My question still remains that we do have 2 buildings. One of them has occupancy already that has been granted, and the other one that doesn't. Both of them, quote unquote, qualify for the suspension of this fee, correct? Both of them, according to this, they qualify for the suspension of this fee. The developer even tried to make an argument that perhaps the other 2 should also have qualified for this, but they decided in the goodwill of the community that no, we're not going to go as far and say the other 2. Now, let me ask you this. Are the Building 1 and Building 2 fully occupied?
Yes, Building 1 and Building 2 and Building 3 are fully occupied. And
fully occupied.
We have a waiting list on Building 4 right now.
So why does Building 3 qualify for the suspension of the fee?
City Attorney.
Because the temporary certificate of occupancy was requested when the suspension had already been in place.
Okay, so that's really, so the dividing line is right there. So it's really Building 3 and Building 4 are the only ones that qualify. Building 1 and Building 2 do not qualify. So now, that's the way I see it, according to the dates when the occupancy was issued, correct? So now Building 3 and Building 4 is what the developers now are saying we would like to have a fee schedule because of financial burden and so forth. It's only just Building 4. Okay. So they want to do it in Building 4, but we don't have an occupancy issue on that one yet because you haven't paid the fee. So we're in this catch-22 thing with this?
The fees have to be paid before the C of O can be, the certificate of opportunity issued. The suggestion is to issue the C of O and have them be able to pay those fees over a time period. That time period is on the last page of the...
Right, okay. Okay, so sorry, we will accept this assuming that immediately after we say, okay, with your fee schedule, you are going to get an occupancy issued. Okay.
Yes.
And we'll request a final inspection from the building department.
I mean, I have no troubles as long as that is stated as such, that there will be a certificate issue. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Costa?
I actually have a question for staff, so if you want to go, thank you. My question would be, is the request by the developer in the beginning to have all of the fees pushed towards the end when the final certificate of occupancy instead of temporary certificates was issued, is that a normal request by developers? Is that something that we've granted in the past, or is that not something we grant? Or
the option for a developer to request their fees goes before their certificate of occupancy. So since that building one, the building department, before they release the building, the complete cycle on that one building is completed. The building fees for the permits and for the impact fees are all paid because there were separate building permits for each building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have a question with regard to this? Okay, who would like to make a motion?
Should we take some public comment?
Ooh, all bad on me. Thank you, Councilmember Martiner. We should. Is there some public that would like to comment? No. All right, seeing no one rise to public comment, we'll come back to the council. And Councilmember Martiner, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to make the recommendation to direct the staff to work with the applicant to prepare an agreement to be signed by the city administrator, prepared by the city attorney, and review management services finance director, outlining payment schedule for the $126,000 in impact fees and security for those payments. That is the motion, basically.
Thank you. Councilmember Ling, would you like to? Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a quick question before we continue with that motion.
Let's get a second.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, and now for discussion. Councilmember Costa?
My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, no. Staff, sorry, question for staff. Do we have an estimate on the cost, the cost impact for following this contract through those 24 months as proposed?
No, but as long as they follow the schedule and make those payments on time, there shouldn't be any large incremental costs associated with that.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other discussion with regard to this item? Seeing none, let's vote. And the motion carries unanimously, 5-0. Thank you.